All right, and we are live. Welcome to Show Me the Money Club with Sergio, myself. We have special guests today, and this is on the Rideshare Guy. This is the YouTube version. Audio podcast is available on all podcasting platforms. Today, we're going to be talking about deactivations and accidents and injuries. So we have two lawyers here today. We have Larry Smith, who is from Smith Marco, dealing with false background deactivations, issues with background checks, things like that. And also we have Bryant Greening from LegalRideshare, who is here talking about accidents and some of the practices and best practices you should do in the event of accidents, injuries, all of that stuff. So first off, we're going to get right into it. But if you need either one of their services, check the links in the description below. All their information, contact information is going to be there. Just tell them that RSG sent you or you saw them on Show Me the Money Club. Let them know where you came from. And also, last thing, make sure you smash that like button. All right. So, Sergio, thanks again for coming on. And also, Larry and Brian, thank you for coming on and sharing with what's going on. Because unfortunately, accidents are a major part because you're always on the road. Also, false background checks are preventing drivers from continuing to drive or getting on the platform itself. So thank you guys for both coming on, and we'd love to hear what you guys have to say today.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming on, Brian and Larry. We're talking today about two really, really important subjects for the driver community. The activations due to false background checks obviously is a major issue. And, if I may say before Brian says it, if you're a full-time driver driving 40, 50, 60 hours and driving 12, 1,500, 2,000 miles a week sometimes, it's not a matter of if, it's when you're going to get into either from a fender bender to a really serious accident. We discuss on the show a lot of numbers, but, last quarter, Uber did 1.87 billion trips. I am pretty sure there were some horrific accidents, either driver's fault, Uber driver's fault, or the other party's fault. And what better way than to get in touch with Brian, after the show, if you're involved in something like this, to find out what your rights are, because either due to fear of of getting deactivated or whatnot, a lot of drivers shy away from, looking for legal recourse. And you guys shouldn't. You really shouldn't. And the same thing goes for background check deactivations, which is run by Checker, which has a checkered reputation in the community, actually, to be honest with you. So with all that said, I'm going to shut up and I'm going to pass it to Brian to introduce himself, what he does, and we'll get into the show. Brian,
Thanks.
welcome.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Bryant Greening. I am an attorney and co-founder at LegalRideshare. We are accident and injury attorneys. We've been in this space for about 7 years now. So we've been growing with Uber and Lyft. As I can remember when we opened our doors, Lyft still had the pink mustaches on the front of the cars. So we're part of the community. My firm focuses entirely on representing drivers who have been involved in accidents and who have been injured on the job. You might ask, why is an accident and injury attorney on the Show Me the Money Club? Well, because that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to put money back in your pocket when you inevitably lose it as a result of a crash. Drivers are entitled to collect things like lost wages, the cost of medical bills, pain and suffering, when they've been involved in a crash. And what we've realized over the years is that many drivers are hesitant to take what's available to them in terms of insurance money, in terms of personal injury protection, depending on the state that you live in, and padding their pockets when really they're in their most vulnerable position. So the reason why I wanted to come on here, and the reason why Sergio were talking about this before he gave me the invite, was we want to arm drivers with the resources to protect themselves from the very beginning, even before an accident occurs. And then when the inevitable happens, arm them with the information that they need to present the best case possible to the police officer who writes the report, to the insurance adjuster who's taking the initial intake, And then ultimately, when you're fighting your claim against the insurance company, or if you end up in court litigating, making sure that you've crossed all your T's, dotted all your I's, and that you're going to maximize the money that goes back to you after you've lost it in this unfortunate event.
So, Brian, I have we do talk a lot about the 4 phases of the insurance policy that drivers have. Unfortunately, a lot of drivers have really no clue what's being provided at what step of the trip, right?
Mhm.
Could you quickly explain to our audience period 0, period 1, period 2, period 3? I'm sure you know a lot about it, and what each period is and what it covers, and with the policy that Uber is providing us with an increased deductible now up to $2,500, which even if you get the small fender bender, drivers don't have 2,500 laying around, right? So to me, that's one of the important things. So coming from you, I think it'll legitimize of what I've been saying or trying to explain to drivers over the years, that know your rights and know what period you're in, where it begins, where it stops. And please, elaborate a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I think I should start by saying that the insurance coverage really varies state by state. So what I'm about to say is more general. And you're going to want to talk to an attorney if you get in an accident in your state or about your state to know how you're covered. But to specifically address your point, there are the 4 stages of being a rideshare driver. Period 0, when you're not acting as a rideshare driver, you're running your personal errands, you're going to the grocery store. In that situation, your personal insurance is going to be what covers you in the event of an accident. Somebody hits you, you're going to go through that other driver's insurance or your own personal policy. Period 1 is when you've got the app on and you're waiting for that ping. You're waiting to connect with a passenger, cruising around. Drivers are extremely vulnerable in period 1. There's a lot of states that don't really offer any protection. The rideshare companies are able to opt out of coverage for property damage, for uninsured, underinsured motorists, meaning if you get hit by somebody who's uninsured, your damages might not be covered by the rideshare policy. And your own personal policy may decline your claim because you're driving on the app. So you're technically on the clock. Period 2 is when you've connected with a passenger and you're on the way to pick up that passenger. In period 3 is when you've got the passenger in the car. Generally speaking, drivers have protection from the insurance companies that cover the rideshare companies during periods 2 and periods 3, but there are all sorts of gaps. There are states that don't require, again, uninsured motorist coverage. So I've got a client that I'm working with right now who was involved in a hit and run crash with a passenger in his car. He has no way of identifying who that, the at-fault driver is. His personal insurance denies the claim, meaning he's got medical bills, things that he needs to pay back. And the rideshare company's insurance is denying the claim too, because they didn't take out the proper insurance to cover that driver. So the legal term for that would be the driver is SOL, out of luck. So what we're seeing is drivers failing to appreciate their vulnerabilities and finding out the hard way that they're not protected. So there are certain things that you can do to protect yourself during all these periods, which starts with your own personal coverage. Because I can tell you, Uber, Lyft, and all the others are not going to change the way they're operating unless they're mandated by law. So you've got to take some personal responsibility for covering up those gaps. I recommend talking to various insurance companies, being honest from the start that you're engaged in rideshare or delivery work. So many drivers don't want to share that information because they're scared that their premiums will go up. Let me tell you, an extra $30 a month is well worth it when you're protecting yourself and your business. We are all entrepreneurs here, and we need to make sure that we're protecting our assets. And your assets include your car and your body, because if either of those fail you, guess who's not paying the bills this month?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree with you. Thank you for the explanation. Really, it was thorough. Now, for all the chat, live chat, questions are flying. I'm going to refrain to just transfer your questions to Bryant or Larry, just for the fact that they have limited amount of time. Obviously, they have their own businesses to run. So what I would actually ask all of you is please, send their law offices or send Brian or Larry an email, introduce yourselves and ask your questions, because for an hour and a half episode, we can't really do all the Q&A. But it's not that I'm shining you guys off. Seriously, it's just a matter of timing and how much time these gentlemen have provided for this episode. So Brian, I was in a hit and run, just like you said. You're dealing with a passenger. I mean, you're dealing with a driver at the moment. And it was, by the time I could get out of the car, the guy took off. It was on the freeway. He hit me, and I had a passenger in the car. It was period 3. And luckily my car was drivable, but then I had to obviously, report it to Lyft and drop passenger off. And within 2 minutes of reporting it, Lyft suspended me. Now, it's not a deactivation. They suspended me for the fact that they want proof that my car is drivable for them to put me back on the platform again. So it literally took me 4 months back and forth with the insurance companies, with the deductible, to get back on the road with Lyft. But at the same time, I was able to drive with Uber, right? Which is kind of ironic that they don't talk to each other and say, don't let Sergio on the platform. He's got a banged up car. The car was not in that bad of a shape. So what I'm trying to say to you is that what would you suggest to drivers who have damages, but they are under the deductible of the $2,500 and, no tell, no show kind of an attitude, and they'll drive? Because look, I'm a passenger on both platforms. I get picked up by some banged up cars, man. And I'm like, this car should not even be on the platform, but then it is what it is. So what would you suggest? How do you deal with that deductible? That is quite high, actually, $2,500.
It's extremely high. And unfortunately, there's not really a way to avoid the deductible if you're forced to go through the rideshare company's insurance policy. That it just is what it is. But the way that you protect yourself is by taking out a policy with a smaller deductible on your personal insurance that will then basically fill that gap. There are many policies that you can purchase where you can say, I never want to pay more than, say, a $500 deductible. Now, again, you pay for that in your premium, but you're capping your deductible by protecting yourself from the beginning, telling your personal insurance policy that you want this coverage, that as a rideshare driver, you understand that there's this high $2,500 deductible, and you want to limit your losses. So it starts with being proactive. The second thing that I would recommend is you always want to try to mitigate your losses. Drivers are sometimes hesitant to go out and rent a vehicle because if they're used to having their own car. Well, it can be expensive to rent a vehicle. It can cost you $300 a week or more. But it's better to be on the road making money and earning, say, $300 less a week because you're paying the rental, as opposed to losing your whole $2,000 that you typically make. So it's going to be a process. You might have to save up some money to fix the vehicle, but mitigating losses is something that I always recommend.
Okay, awesome. So Chris just put up your driver checklist in case of an accident, right? Could you please go through these and explain what it is that they should be doing in case of from a small accident to a bigger one?
Yeah, the most important thing I think is to treat every accident the same, because every accident has the ability to affect your livelihood. Whether you're injured or not injured, you need to get the police out to the scene. Drivers, again, are often hesitant to do that because they don't want to slow down their night. They think if this is a fender bender, we'll just be on our way and I'll keep working. Well, the police are extremely important because they're documenting the evidence. They're collecting information from both the parties. They might be able to get your passenger to give their name and contact information when the passenger may be unwilling to give that to you. They're taking measurements at the scene. They're taking, sometimes they're documenting property damage. These are all factors that are going to go into the insurance claim, which is where the money is. We want the evidence so that we can show the insurance company and perhaps a jury, if it gets to that point, what happened. If the accident is your fault, we do recommend obviously being polite, but you don't want to make a decision as to whose fault the accident is. You don't need to apologize. You don't need to say, my bad. Just, provide the information that the parties are requesting, whether it's the police officer asking for your insurance, the other party asking to see your driver's license, exchange all that. But let the police officers, let the lawyers, let the insurance companies be the one to decide fault. You don't need to decide it right there. In the same vein, unless you're in an unsafe position on the road, you shouldn't move the vehicles from their resting spots after the crash. The reason I say that is because that's going to give the investigators a lot of information about how this crash occurred. Say there's two vehicles that hit, it looks like one is coming into the other person's lane. Well, the angles of the vehicles are going to help demonstrate the facts of the crash. If you move the vehicles and you both curb them, the other person can say, no, he pulled into me. And you're saying, no, he pulled into me. And then it's a he said, she said situation that's going to be really difficult to prove. Insurance information is obviously important. That's the basis of the claim. I recommend taking pictures again as evidence so that we can show property damage, markings on the roads, the positions of the vehicles. This is all extremely important. And in addition to pictures, which is not on this list, we've got to have dash cam footage. If you don't have a dash camera, you are shooting yourself in the foot when it comes to property damage claims, injury claims, what Larry's going to talk about later in terms of maybe false accusations or deactivations. This is all invaluable evidence. It's a cost of doing business. Spend the $100 and put something like that in your car. In the same regard, we need to talk about injuries. If people are hurt, make sure that you call an ambulance, get the medical treatment that you need. You want to start documenting the facts of your injury, the pains you're feeling, how they're progressing, when they started. All that goes into the medical records and is then evidence in your injury claim. So the sooner you can get in to see a doctor, the easier it's going to be for me to claim and prove that the accident caused your injury, because we see accident happen, we see medical treatment happen, and it all starts from there. The last thing I'll just say on this is many drivers are afraid to go get treatment because they're scared of the medical bills. They're trying to be heroes and saying, you know what, I'll just shake it off and I'll be fine. That's the absolute worst thing that you can do. You don't need to necessarily go to the emergency room where you're going to get $1,000 of bills, but you should at very least see a primary care doctor or go to an urgent care. So we're starting the process. If you feel better a day later and you don't need any more care, well then, okay, you've got that $100 bill that you've got to figure out how to pay, but you've protected yourself. If God forbid things get worse, well then we have closed that gap in treatment. There is no gap in treatment. I can then take your medical records and say, look when all this started. It started right after the crash, and look where we are now, 6 months, year, however long you've got to be treating thereafter.
Right. Great info. I know you don't have too much time, but what I would like for you to touch upon is that, you mentioned the dash cam, right? I mean, unfortunately, a majority of drivers do not have a dash cam. And I think as you said, it's an amazing investment. I mean, it'll pay for itself. Like Larry's going to talk about, the activations as such, but, and in the case of an accident, I mean, what better way? The thing that I want you to also explain is that I think you're in Chicago, correct? You're based in Chicago. Okay. Yeah. So how could people reach you? And then do you provide services outside the state of Illinois, or do you have other, connections that if I'm in California and get in a crash, will you be able to take care of me? How the process works? So give us a little bit of how they can get in touch with you. Once they get in touch with you, if you accept the case, is it a free consultation? How does it work?
Yeah, so the best way to reach us is through our website at LegalRideshare.com. You can also email us at help, HELP, at LegalRideshare.com. Consultations are always free. It costs nothing to talk to me. If you reach out to Legal Rideshare, you're going to get me on the phone. So I want to stress that whether it's a fender bender, whether it's a catastrophic injury, or anything in between, you want to talk to a lawyer so that you're protecting yourself and you're knowing which path to go down. There are times in which I honestly believe that a person can handle the claim themselves. If you have minimal treatment, if we're talking about a simple property damage claim, I will tell you what to do. And then I will tell you go on your way and do it. You don't need to pay me. If I don't think I can add value to your case, then that's going to be, you know, the consultation that we'll have. If I believe that I can add value to your case and that our legal services are going to be beneficial, then if you're in Chicago, I can definitely help. If you're out of Chicago, I can certainly point you in the right direction. And we have contacts that we trust nationwide. I've got a rideshare lawyer ready to go in all 50 states. So if you're in Wyoming and you get in an accident, I'm going to give you the consultation. And if I can help you, great. If I feel like we need to talk to somebody who's in Wyoming to make sure that you're best protected, I can send you there. So no matter where you are, I would be happy to consult you for free and then direct you in the right way.
So one last thing for you. I mean, I know you deal with Lyft and Uber insurance companies. It's not them, obviously. They have bought a commercial insurance package with some insurance company or not. How difficult are these people to deal with? I mean, because in my case, they were truly difficult. Like it was like talking to the wall. But we hear horror stories that, people try to handle their cases themselves and they're just not getting anywhere with the adjusters or the other insurance company, or even if the accident wasn't their fault. We hear that all the time. So truly, are they really this difficult to deal with? I mean, obviously they don't want to pay out, they're on the other end, but the drivers are making the companies. I mean, we're making them money. So to me, it's like, I think the best advice probably would be just to protect your rights. Other than that, but if you have anything to finish or add to whatever we spoke about, floor is yours.
Yeah, just to answer your question, the insurance companies can be very difficult to deal with because it's their job to protect their money. It's not their job to pass it out to you. There are cases in which drivers have great success by themselves, but I can tell you, you are making a mistake if you don't at least talk to a lawyer beforehand to know what your rights are. One of the things that I see all the time is drivers who spend the first 3-4 months trying to do it themselves and then coming to me and saying, hey, can you pick up where I left off? A lot of times I can, but a lot of times there have been mistakes made that make the claim much more difficult than it needed to be and make the recovery much less than it should have been. So if you call the lawyer, get the consultation from the beginning, at least you know what you're doing when you're talking to the insurance adjuster if you decide to handle it yourself.
Okay.
Then
one quick addition to that. I mean, we know the gig economy doesn't exist of only rideshare. We have obviously food delivery, package delivery, all kinds of things, Instacart. From what I know, because I see it on my statements, Uber or Lyft or Uber Eats, DoorDash, Grubhub, none of these companies are responsible if you get in a crash during a delivery, or are they?
Some of them have coverage. There is coverage that like DoorDash, for one, does provide some coverage to drivers.
Okay.
But again, oftentimes the policies are minimal and the deductibles are high, which goes back to making sure that you're protecting yourself for whatever platform you're on.
Okay, so you do handle, personal injury cases as well as, a delivery driver's case as well, if it comes to that, right?
Any person who works in the gig economy, if there's an app that's giving you orders, whether it's rides or food or anything else, we can help.
Thank you, Bryant. I really appreciate it. I mean, I think this is a topic that does not get spoken enough about, really. I mean, I think drivers should know their rights just like anybody else. Like I may be driving my son to soccer practice, get in an accident at period 0. I know how to handle that. But then once I have a passenger in the car or on the way to a passenger or looking for a trip with my app on, driving around, I don't think people know. Honestly, I don't think people know. And Uber and Lyft really don't do good enough of a job to explain this to the drivers. And it's really complicated, pages and pages and stuff. So if you have anything else to add, please do so. Otherwise, we appreciate you coming on, and we'll see you in the near future.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Bryant.